Yeah.
I would be very comfortable not writing another poem in my life. I know.
No.
Again, things I can't say in
the dog.
Hello and welcome to the Process Podcast, the podcast where I can talk about whatever I want to because it's my podcast and not yours. There we go, the harmonised intro there. Harmonised, synchronised, the eyes, the eyes intro. That's how I'm going to phrase that one. As I have Ellie the Satge on the sofa.
Hello, woo! And the crowd goes wild.
Cool. So this is one of the few times we've always got the video podcast. That's always an option all the time. But I will make a very important point now for anyone who is not watching the video podcast. Today's episode, Ellie has a guest on the sofa. Ellie, do you want to introduce your guest as well, please?
I would love to introduce my guest. I have an adorable cockapoo by the name of Matsy, and I'm dog sitting her at the moment. And so I brought her along and she's gorgeous. So definitely watch her on the video. Hashtag worth it.
Indeed. So yes, we have got the first ever processed dog on the video call today. Eat that, Thomas. You didn't get your dog on here first. We saw the dog at everything, but not on the podcast just yet. I'm not calling people out. I'm not that kind of a person. This is not that kind of a podcast.
No, it's not that kind of show.
No, I mean, it could be if you want to. Right, leave a comment. Get in the comments. We can make it that kind of a show. We can make it a call out show.
Who's we? I'm not getting involved.
Who wants to be the Drake to my Kendrick? We can do some shit there.
Oh my god!
And yes, I'm dating the podcast by making that reference, and I don't care.
Yeah. Oh my god, you're dating the podcast. You're exclusive.
Actually, I'm kind of in a poly thing. It's kind of an open thing.
Slay.
I'm allowed to be in other podcasts as well.
Very true. Very real.
But speaking of this podcast, the way I like to start this podcast, however I want to phrase it, it's my podcast. I can phrase it however I want to.
Period.
Is starting off with how we met each other. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but...
Oh, I will. No, go on.
I can't remember if I actually... Because I know that obviously Hit the Ode... not Hit the Ode. So I know Grizzly Pear was obviously one the first time to properly interacted together. I'm just trying to remember if I also saw you at Unislam before that.
Maybe, possibly. I kind of joined the Unislam community when it was COVID times, and then and I wasn't really that active until I was more of a coach on the team. So I think it probably was Grizzly Pear, which was great. That was the first time I interacted with your poetry also. And yeah, I didn't go, we didn't really become friends then. We didn't really chat too much, but I was just like, yeah, cool. He's really good. Because I didn't go out after, which I know a few poets did, but I was not one of them.
If memory serves as well, I remember when you were there, you were a little bit older than some of the others there.
Rude.
No
need for that.
No, which I really loved because of that thing of because I remember that Grizzly Pear, there was a poet that went up on that Grizzly Pear who was I just turned 18 and it was
off.
yeah. And it was a thing of everyone is little
and I'm
kids.
so old and haggard and
exactly.
You found that charming.
Exactly. We bonded over being old and haggard, as I say, as I am 7 years older than you.
Yeah, and we do it to this day. That's on, we really do. We do. Yeah, that's very true because I guess for listeners, it's not that interesting, but just context, I guess. I went to uni 2 years later, quote unquote, than I should have. So I was a fresher when I was 20, which it doesn't make a big difference, but also sometimes it does in some ways. And then I stayed on to do my master's as well. So it meant that by the time I was done with all of that, I was a little bit older than everyone else or most other people. And most of the time, it's not something I would say I noticed or cared about. But also, sometimes there are little things where you're like, oh yeah, I'm actually old.
It was, at least for me, when everyone is saying, oh, they're 19, they're 20, whatever. So I think of
No.
So, okay, cool. Okay, you're an age I'm legally allowed to be around. I mean, it's not... That look.
Oh, that's...
No.
Welcome to the podcast where I just give you side eyes.
Oh, no, it was just that vibe. It was like, some of these people are very young and I don't, are you allowed to be out drinking? And you are.
And they are, but it's it's weird. No, I've definitely had that a few times, especially in more studenty nights, which Grizzly Pear is an excellent night, but it's a student-led night. So that kind of, the demographic tends to be a lot younger, I would say. So yeah, but yeah, we bonded that time. You made a group of mostly majority white 18, 19-year-olds. You were like, yeah, if you don't buy my book, you're racist.
It was featuring during Black History Month, and my sales pitch was, well, if you don't buy my book, you're racist.
And it's true. And it was so funny because I saw a bunch of, 18, 19-year-old white students be like, yes, I'm going to buy the book. Yeah, let's go.
So
excellent.
As my advice to you is think of your sales pitches now, etc. Think of that vibe. Like, this is not giving the game away, but I'm very aware that whenever I've got feature gigs, etc., as much as I love to live in the moment and I don't say improvise, but I don't plan out and rehearse what I'm saying between poems too much.
We can tell. No, I'm joking.
I mean, honestly, you probably can, but there is a little part. I mean, it's always there's a joke. I thought of a nice joke here, or a thing that linked, as I'm loosely thinking of a set, a thing of here is today's pitch, or that would be a fun phrase if I can say it properly. A lot of the time I trip over my words too much to say it properly, but it's definitely a thing of, that'd be a fun sales pitch to say out loud, or let's see what happens if I say that on stage. I remember before I had my book, and one of my things was, I don't have a book to sell, but if you would buy me a book, you can buy me a beer instead. Which
is true, and also is much like my hosting skills at everything is, oh, look, there's a bar. Guess you're going to buy me a drink then. Actually, any poet who is listening who doesn't have a book, is mostly, for whatever reason, mostly performance-based, isn't interested in it, whatever, do that. Let's normalize that. Ask people to buy things for you.
But before we get too off track, I do vaguely have a plan for the podcast. Therefore, the plan means that we're now going to go into the first initial segment of this podcast called Timelines. So for the timeline section, we go very... I always want to say Charles Dickens, and I feel like I'm right. I always get my people... I'm bad at English. I'm bad at knowing books. But it's Charles Dickens who did The Ghost of Christmas Past, Present and Future. I want to say
yes, but if we're both wrong, it's going to be really embarrassing.
We're both going to be wonderfully embarrassed at some point. Someone will call me out on my bullshit. Probably Kayla, because Kayla was very well read.
Yeah.
But...
Side note, I saw their reading list from April. I was intimidated and impressed.
They do the reading.
Love it.
But on this, then, as a vague tangent on this, your past in your creative field, etc. How did you get into, I'm going to go for spoken word and poetry. Were you an avid reader? Was it button poetry? What is the thing that got you into this spoken word malarkey?
Shout out to button poetry.
Yeah, sure, fine.
Brought many of us into the scene.
Yes.
And there are some great poems on that channel that are out there. I was always, anyone who knows me who's listening is going to be like, no, we couldn't tell. I was a drama kid.
Theatre kids, I think, is the phrase we use nowadays.
I'm embarrassed. I don't even want to say it. So you can correct me. I just wish it wasn't true. So I was, a theatre kid. And so I was always on the stage. And yes, since I was literally in primary school, English was always my best subject. Even now, if I bump into anyone from primary school, they're like, oh, are you still, if I tell them I'm a poet, they're like, yeah, that makes sense. Even if they hadn't seen me since year 6 or whatever, which is just always a bit funny to me. So I wrote my first novel when I was in year 4. It was called The London L. And all of the... I'm always taking L's. I can't even remember what it was about. Really embarrassed by it. But now I'm at an age where I'm okay, now it's endearing. I'm far enough now in age for it to be cute. But for a long time, I was like, Mum and Dad, shut up. Stop bringing this up.
So, when did you go from novels and that level of fiction into poetry? Or was...
Yeah, I think K Tempest is a huge influence on me. And I was actually speaking about this the other day because I saw them at the Poets Revival. And when I saw K Tempest's poem, My Shakespeare, on YouTube when I was like doing my A-levels, I think, that not only changed how I thought what a poem could be, because the way that obviously poetry is taught at GCSE and A-levels is not really exciting or fun necessarily for everyone. But what really got me interested and excited in poetry was seeing that poem by K Tempest, because then I thought, wow, Shakespeare is actually really cool. And also poetry is really cool. And the way that they've expressed themselves and their love for Shakespeare felt very tangible and very authentic in a way where I was like, I can actually feel the emotion of this poem. It's excellent. Highly recommend to anyone who hasn't seen or heard it. It's great. And that just kind of, opened my eyes to poetry a little bit more. Then I went through, when I was like 18, 19, I went through a major breakup. And I was like, I'm going to write poems. And it was, now in hindsight, I know that what I was doing was free writing. I was just writing, just pen to paper without thinking, every day for a month. And then from that, I highlighted words and phrases that I liked and then meshed them into a 10-minute long poem. And that was like kind of the first poem I ever properly wrote. And then I went and performed it at the Battersea Arts Centre, and a few of my friends came and supported, which was amazing. Then it was really the English and creative writing undergrad degree that I did that cemented it for me. So that was like my first, I dabbled. I was like, ooh, this K Tempest person, I wonder if they're big.
And at the time, like they were, this is weird always looking at the timeline of K Tempest. Like I vaguely remember there was like a BBC 4 documentary or thing they were on at one stage, and like
props.
I feel like because everyone's been trying to get documentaries of poetry, I think in multiple ways. Like I remember seeing them in that. I remember when I was younger.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to do a thing at the place near Waterloo, Royal Festival Hall. That's the one.
I was going to say the Walrus Bar and Hostel.
Plugging your shit, always on.
Terrible. Not quite the same venue.
No, I was doing Royal Festival Hall, and like K Tempest was like one of the feature acts there. And I was like, at the time, it was not as big a deal of like, oh my God, you were on the same bill.
Were you featuring alongside?
It was like one of the Apples and Snakes kind of, we've got 20, 30 kids kind of thing. And like, I knew Jacob Samler-Rose. He got me on a lot of things. So it was a thing of like, cool, I did a gig with K Tempest. And at the time, it was definitely a level of that was cool. Oh, they're really good. The people should know about them kind of thing.
This is outrageous, yeah.
And then it's like you're really... Like, I remember the Loud Poets messaged me once because they asked, like, do I have a contact with K Tempest? Because I was at one stage Facebook friends with K Tempest.
Flex.
And it's a thing of like, yes, because back then everyone was Facebook friends.
No, of course.
It's like following someone on Twitter kind of thing. Like, cool, they followed back, but it doesn't mean they know me. There's a difference.
They don't know my story.
They don't watch my stories. They could see them. They don't.
No. That's so fair. And yeah, I mean, it's not a crazy idea for you to, the poetry community in many ways is very small, in many ways is very big. But if we're thinking about it and it's, how few poets there are, we'll have mutuals maybe with someone who has been writing for that long and is of that level, I guess, in their career. So it's not an outrageous or outlandish thing to imagine you two being friends or knowing each other, especially given how long you've been on the scene for, as well. But they are huge, and I think they've gotten a lot of people into poetry.
Yes.
But it was really my first degree, humble brag. It was my first degree that really cemented it for me with poetry. Being taught under Luke Kennard, Isabel Gallimore, and even, the other lecturers who don't primarily write poetry, but were just very keen to encourage us. And that was where I really found, poetry is my thing. And that also linking to performance poetry and spoken word. The first poetry night I ever properly went to was Grizzly Pear. And that I then saw, this is community. Like, this is how the community can actually be built, and I was really grateful to have met amazing poets through that and amazing friends through that. And it's, you know, it's in hindsight, I'm like, wow, it's crazy how going to an event and feeling welcomed and feeling seen will keep you going, and then that process of going and then going to another night is what will then keep you writing. Like for me, the poetry community and writing like are necessary, because if people are there validating you and saying, I really liked your poem, you're going to write another one. You know, it's just that which sounds really obvious, but I think it bears repeating and bears mentioning, because without that community, I wouldn't have gotten so involved and then started running my own things. And
with that, then, like, going into your present now, obviously, as vaguely mentioned, we've got the book coming out, as you've already plugged. We've also got the Poetry Night at the Walrus Bar, etc. Where are you currently with your creativity and your creative practices? Obviously, you're facilitating and you're writing. So how would you describe where they are?
It's a good question. I think, you know, I'm trying at the moment to actually do a bit less on the facilitating and a bit more on the creating, just because where my emotional energy can be so fixated or, you know, zeroed in on the community and making space for other people, which is great and excellent, and I wouldn't change it for the world. Sometimes, you know, outside of my day job as well, there's only so much I have in me to then get. Sometimes I'm just like, well, I've actually done a lot of facilitating or planning behind the scenes of all of these things. Now I just want to scroll on TikTok for 2 hours, because you physically cannot be doing so much creativity. And I think community
Challenge
building
accepted.
Girl, please no. Where are you at with your creativity? Yeah.
Me and my creativity, as people can't see because they used to be filming this right now, it is going into documenting more of this scene. I'm in a similar timeline pattern to when my first book came out, in that book comes out first, let's say 6 to 9 months is promoting it, doing some touring gigs, etc. Still got a couple of gigs coming up soon.
Woo.
But after that level of cool, the book has come out, so I spent all the time writing it. Now I spent all the time performing and promoting it.
Yeah.
Now we're doing let's just stop doing the not stopping in the poetry, but like, let's do other things. For me, it is doing the documenting and filming of it. I've got the documentary that I need to, I'm choosing to keep doing. That's focus. As mentioned off camera, that thing of like, do I want to become the next regular poetry people, like a Muddy Feet, a Muddy Feet, whatever, etc. Not quite button poetry-esque, but a similar level of, I document the scene, that's what I'm doing. And the UK does not have that as a regular thing in that sense. And especially we've got, as you will see, we've got the new branding on all the process stuff.
Yeah.
So a level of, is this the time to like, well, now that I've got new branding and I feel the professionalism with that, let's capitalize on that. I need to say that whilst I did not steal your FAQ stuff, I might be stealing the badges. Badges might be a thing.
Yes.
No, we're looking at stickers. Well, stickers are definitely a thing I want to look into.
Cute.
But
Cute.
yeah, there's definitely a level of it. We've got the new branding, let's market ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that kind of now goes into, wonderfully, a nice segue into future things of where are you looking to take your stuff in the future? Like, you said, obviously, you're focused on creativity now, but like, is that a level of creativity and facilitating will to like kind of flow back and forth? Or is it a level of, cool, I've done the facilitating, I'll keep everything or whatever going, but I just want to be like, do you want to be, I am published poet and will be always publishing books, or just a fun, where is your future plans, goals?
My future plans and goals are definitely to continue what I'm doing currently. I think for anyone, it can sometimes be easy to fall into the thought pattern of like, oh, okay, I've done this thing, and then you're forgetting the present, but in a way where you're always striving for more, always, and then you forget, like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, I think is what I'm trying to say. So I'm very aware of the things that I'm doing presently. I'm doing them well. I'm doing them successfully. It takes work. It takes a lot of hard work, and I'm just trying to speak on that because that is just the truth, and it's important to validate that. So with that in mind, a lot of my poetry future, while of course I have aspirations and things that I don't have right now, there are many things that I'm like, yeah, I want to keep working on this. So I want to keep running my monthly poetry night, everything. I like the venue. I like that I have a good relationship with the staff there, and they're amazing. The team are just fantastic. I like that it's a bar and you can bring your own food. It's very relaxed. It's comfortable and it's grassroots and intentionally so. So I like how that is right now. Doesn't mean I'm going to be there forever. If there's future venues, if you're listening to this and you have a venue, but I'm very content with it right now because I see all the benefits of it. That's also how I feel about the poetry workshop that I run with Nabila, everything in between. It's a free workshop for people to come to, and we can all write together, and it's been going really well. I want to keep doing that in the future as well. And also it's very easy. I don't know if you maybe felt like this with Blackish, but you're like, cool, I have this book coming out that I've been working on for a long time, but obviously before the release date. Cool, what am I going to work on now? I need to get the second book. I need to do and that's great because, I think as creatives, even if it's not for monetary gain, but we should always be, in the process of something. I was jokingly like, when Blackish came out, I was like, I'm done now. I've done the thing. I don't need to do anymore. Which is valid. You're like, do you know what? Bye. I think there's definitely two. No, I don't know. Definitely is too strong a word, Tyrone. I feel like there are predominantly two streams of thoughts coming out of the first book. There is one train of thought which I think I fell more into the level of, well, I've written this now. I don't know what more I can write now. This was the things I wanted to write. I've said what I wanted to say now. Yeah. I have nothing left to say. That's interesting. And then obviously the other school of thought, well, I've started speaking. I want to keep speaking kind of thing. I think those are the two. Talk, Valentina. I'd like to keep the mask on. That's... Sorry, yeah, that took me a second. That was a beautiful merging of two references. I'd like to keep it on. Did you watch season 6? No. Save that for after. We'll save it for after. But that's really interesting where you think, yeah, I've got a point of view and I want to express that point of view, and I've done that, and then kind of enjoy it and let it marinate and but then you're like, actually, there's more. Well, it was the things I think I know for me at least, a level of, I've said this many a time, probably on the podcast, but I have always approached poetry as a fun hobby. Yeah. And whilst I have never felt any level of if I don't write, I'm going to have a less satisfying life. Yeah. I would be very comfortable not writing another poem in my life. I know. No. Again, things I can't say in the dog. Things I can't say in the poetry podcast. But no, I would be comfortable and fine if I don't write another poem in my life. I probably will write more poems, kind of thing. I won't be comfortable or fine with that. But I feel like my life does not feel less satisfying if I don't write a poem. I get you. Yeah. For me, because you've got so many other creative outlets as well, I suppose. Some level of that, poetry was the thing I got into. I know lots of people came to poetry for they've always wanted to do, always had something to say. I got into it by accident. It's always been a thing. Oh, this is a thing. I've never felt the desire in that sense. I like doing it, and I will occasionally have I want to say something vibes. Yeah. But I would if it's cool, you can either never write a poem again or blah blah blah. It's I'm fine never writing a poem again. I can live with that. But for you, yeah. So we're saying probably more books in the future. Yeah. Would it want to be to the level where we are full-time poets, if that ever exists? I would love that. I would love that. I think, yeah, I have total respect for people who hobby poets, for want of a better phrase. I think that's really important, and I'm not saying that in to be, I guess, I don't know, patronizing or anything like that. I think no, anyone can come to poetry for whatever reason and can publish books and still can have their books published and still consider themselves a hobby poet. That's completely valid and really important. For me personally, I would like to be more more professional poetry and go down that line. So in terms of poetry futures, whilst my pamphlet is coming out, of course, at the same time, I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm going to start building on my next portfolio, my next manuscript. And I want to be, headlining more gigs. So it's also, I think we've spoken about this, off podcast in the past, but like putting myself out there and just seeing if poetry gigs want me to headline, just because I want to be a bit more active in that sense. And I'm very grateful to have headlined a few nights so far. And I have a couple of upcoming ones, which I'm really excited about. But, to try and put myself out there a little bit more. Because, I've had headliners for everything, for example, that headline because they were like, hey, can I headline? And I checked them out and I thought they were really good. And I was like, yes. So I'm like, wait, that works on me. Why don't I, and if
practice what you preach and all that kind of stuff.
Do you know what I mean? And the worst thing that someone can say is no. And if they say no, I asked I won't say which night, but I asked a poetry night if I could headline. They were like, we're actually booked up for the foreseeable. And I was like, that's literally fine. So I'm trying to, practice what I preach a little bit more. So poetry futures definitely want to be striving to become a better poet and write better stuff and keep writing. I've got a mentor who I really value and appreciate. And I've been doing a bit of mentoring myself, which I also love doing. And building on like the craft of poetry and, just always keeping my mind active with poetry as best as I can, whether that's reading a collection or, equally valuable to me anyway, going to poetry nights as well, to just listen and absorb as much as I can. So that's my poetry future is, would love to have more works published, headline more, who knows, maybe forward prize one day. Let's speak that into existence. Why not? Like, let's be wild with our ambitions and what we want. I don't know. Anyway, that's my answer.
I mean, like, nothing in. They are some level of achievable in the fact of like, there are people we know and have interacted with that have made it to that forward level, that published by Penguin level, all of that. It's becoming, I don't want to say more and more accessible, but like it's definitely one of those dreams that's like, this is not an absurdity anymore, which is nice to think of. But nevertheless, we're going to now talk about a couple of things in my section known as Let's Talk About. Where do you want to start then? What do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about the publishing and book side of things first? Or the open mic and community side of things first?
Ooh, you choose. The
whole point was I asked you to pick.
Okay. Let's do community.
Cool. So it's my podcast, not yours. Let's do book first.
Fuck my drag.
No. We all do community first. So like,
the emotional roller coaster.
This is the vibe we get for all the ups and downs of this podcast.
It's just, wait, what's that Riverdale quote? Like the epic highs and lows of high school football.
I don't know why I don't know why you asked me what that Riverdale quote was, as if I'd know the Riverdale quote.
You know why I asked you.
No, like, so random tangent on this.
Yay.
I have always described my music taste as the song that would play at the end of any CW show.
Any CW show?
The CW responsible for playing, for broadcasting Riverdale, but also Smallville, Supernatural, 90210.
Excellent.
And anything like, all those shows would have that indie rock band with a song at the end of it. Sometimes slow and mellow because it's a sad episode. Sometimes, that music taste is my music taste. That CW end of, that's my music taste.
That is your music taste.
Though, whilst music can bring people together, so can poetry.
So cute.
And you do that.
A beautiful segue.
It's how I run. This is honestly my hosting style as well. That thing of like a kind of like, so, Kayla keeps talking about the fact that like, it seems at times that I have a longer spiel for some people, etc. And like, you're saying these big intros. Like, I just occasionally I am forever online. I keep a
You
track
love
of
to
this
yap.
stuff.
You love to yap.
Whereas like everything, you are very good with everything. Like the whole like you've tagging everyone on Instagram, you keeping up with all the people on Instagram, etc. Like how important is community for you, and how important with that is open mics to community?
It's so important. Spoiler alert. Like I mentioned earlier, a huge reason why I even do the damn thing with writing my own stuff is because of the encouraging people that I met coming up in the Birmingham scene. And so I really just, it always bears repeating, to be quite honest, about how important the community is to even just come together. If one person speaks to you at a poetry night and is like, hey, how are you? Or not even that, it's just like, hey, can I sit next to you? Whatever it might be, that goes such a long way. And this is also why when I'm hosting everything, I'm always encouraging people to talk to each other and to compliment each other. And I know you and Kayla do the same thing as well. A lot of people, a lot of poets naturally do that anyway, because I think anyway, hot take, wanting community is an innate part of poets, especially poets that come to open mic nights. It's like, yes, because you want to share with a group of people who are doing a similar thing of writing the poem.
I mean, it's that whole thing of like, in the least vain way possible, but I think there's some vanity. no, not even vanity, but like in the least vain way possible, there's that level of, I think poets want people to like go, yes, you are correct.
Of course.
Yes, what you said is right. It's like, cool.
We're all looking for validation, yeah.
And I think there is definitely that side of things, in that people want to kind of have that like crowd that goes, you said a thing I agree with, and not to stereotype and overgeneralize, and putting it as the start in this, to overgeneralize a lot of poets. I think not a lot of poets, to overgeneralize some poets.
Yeah.
There is that level of finding that in the stereotype of a poet, not always the most popular person in some levels of society, etc. It's been like the uncool school kid, the theatre kid, etc. But like,
I was really cool and popular.
but like the idea that like, not that a popular person can't be a poet or anything like that kind of thing. We're not full on fucking mean girls and this shit, but
you can't sit with us.
The idea of like, oh, I've now finally found the people 100%. And my space in my corner, and that's, I think, at some level of open mic stuff. Let's be so honest, like a lot of us come to poetry because we're trying to process something difficult, and whether that is from a place of, mental health issues or, bereavement, grief, bullying, a lot of us come through it because we have something to express that, it's a very healthy mechanism of doing that. And so I think that is right. We all go through struggles. Every human being goes through struggles. But, poetry is a cathartic way to process it. And it's not every poem ever, but I think as a starting point, that's how I got into poetry and how a lot of poets I've spoken to got into it themselves. So I think that's right. And then finding people to hear you and to say, look, I might not have your lived experience. I might not have been through that. But I hear you and I've given you this space. And I think that's very powerful. There's a lot of sharing of vulnerabilities at poetry nights that makes people more open, because if you see someone being vulnerable and pull their heart out on stage, you're going to want to say, hey, that's great and I'm here for you. And it doesn't even have to be like you then become best friends and then hang out forever and ever, but you're like, in that space and time, I hear you and you are valid. That is so powerful. And it doesn't all have to be negative either. It's not like every poem is going to be really sad or anything like that. But even if it's a positive thing, to be like, that was a gorgeous poem. Laurie Eves writes gorgeous poems about his wife. Like, they're beautiful. And it's like, thank you for sharing that. That was gorgeous, So it's also the positives as well. Moving from that side of things, I know one of the, for as positive as it can be, one of the stigmas and things attached to some of these communities is that they can be a bit cliquey, etc. And I think at least putting my take forward first to some degree, a level of, there are people that will go to these nights multiple times, will go to multiple nights a month or whatever. And I think understandably it's a natural thing of like, well, I keep seeing you at these same events, etc. So we're going to be closer.
You can't get rid of me.
But like, you'll always have people that you'll be closer to, etc. But just in general, like thought. I was going to do a Doctor Who thing. No, thoughts on the cliqueiness that potentially can happen, and B, how is there anything you do to either get around that, or is that not a thing that you necessarily put stock in as someone who runs a night, etc.?
It's a really good question, and it's something that I have a lot of convos with people about in general. I think wherever, this might be a very hot take, but I think wherever there is community, there is a high chance or risk of cliques, and sometimes that's not a bad thing. I think where cliques are cliques, it's where they exclude other people, or where it's like you're only exclusively going to speak in inside jokes and references. And something that I actually thanked Kayla on, or not thanked, I acknowledged and said that was really cool, was like, you know, obviously if you've got regulars who come to poetry night, there's lore that builds. Of course there is, you know, and that's the thing that happens at everything. It happens at Process, it happens at every poetry night, because you have your regulars and you have your new people, and it's beautiful, and that's how it should be and how it always is. There's a healthy mix of those. But sometimes obviously with regulars, and this is not shading anyone, but it's like if there was something that happened at the last Process productions, for example, that was really funny, like Tig being the hat bitch, you know, hilarious. Oh. But it's really lovely because but you know, you're acknowledging that for the people that were there and you know, I thought it was hilarious and it was great. I was there at the last Process and this one, so I could see that. But I think what's really great was that you and Kayla like explained the joke, and I think that's the difference. For me, that's a good example of a difference between a clique and community and like family building, and like because of course there's going to be inside jokes, but it's like, oh, by the way, like here's an inside joke, this is the context of it.
Well, like it's always, I find that a fascinating one, because I'm just like, there are some things, and I will freaking still, not me personally, but I in my generation will take credit for new shit was our thing. New shit was the phrase that at the time we were doing open mics, we started doing that a good decade or so ago. I'd almost attribute it to fucking forget what you heard, but that was a thing that was not present all the time I was doing open mics. Yeah. Whilst we were doing open mics, that became a thing. Yeah. But like, there are some parts of the lore of these nights that just, we don't explain it. It's just a thing you do, you get into it. And I think similar to, admittedly, like at some nights they'll have the like, play it back, say it again stuff. There will be things at a level of, we're not going to explain this one, you'll figure this out. It can at times catch a new person out, for sure. Yeah. But some things are like, okay, no, this is just the vibe of it. Whenever you go to, like, if I went to a regular comedy night, they might have a couple of things that like, well, here's the thing I go to a drag night, here's the things that they will do. There'll be some chants. I go to wrestling. I'm very well, I've just gone so many tangents there in that one sentence.
But so, I think we could speak on the hosting of all of those events, because I think I've picked up so many hosting skills from comedy shows. I used to work at a comedy club as a bartender, and so seeing how the compere worked and what he did, I'm like, oh cool, I'm stealing that. So there's actually something in that. It's not a coincidence that those are the things that you enjoy going to.
Yeah, like just like there are things that have, like in that same vein of like, I know I mentioned at one point I'll put a loud poets counter on these fucking videos, but like it's nice seeing how they run stuff because some of them have wrestling backgrounds and just in general are fans of wrestling. It's happens to be a thing they happen to have in common. And they have taken level of, this is an entertainment form that we like. It's entertaining, what entertaining things can we translate into our own product for the capitalist consumerist way of phrasing that, but is that thing of like, oh, I enjoy that energy, I enjoy that joke, that bit, that whatever. Can I bring that into my thing, etc.? Oh, like a very weird tangent on this.
Yes.
I go to a wrestling show called Progress. This is in the Electric Ballroom. And one of the things they do is one of their traditions things is during the interval, they will always play the conga song and have a conga during every interval. And it's just thing, they just do it all the time. It's like, that's just the thing they do. And like, I'm not saying poets like, should do this, but that thing of like, oh, it's a thing they do. And it's like, oh, that's just a thing which is not tied to wrestling.
Yeah.
It's not about wrestling. It's just here is a thing that we will do each month that's entertaining, that gets people involved.
Yeah.
And almost level of like Genesis have been doing it more. They're like, cool, and now we're going to play the music and we're going to do the song moment or whatever at the start of the final round or whatever. But like having like, here's our bit. It's a fun little bit to do. And
but I feel like those bits that you've kind of listed don't necessarily alienate people. And I think that's an important thing. But I appreciate when inside jokes are explained to an audience because you never know who anyone can go to any poetry night at any time. And that's how it should be and how it must be, actually. Whilst I love all of the regulars who come to everything, it's like the new people obviously are equally important. Everyone is equal. Like you just it has to be that way. So yeah, something that I try to do in my hosting is tell people to talk to each other, because whilst there are a lot of poets that will do that, because many of us are trying to build community and so have that intention anyway, it's insane what like the permission to do that, what that permission does to change the vibe of a night.
Well, not quite lastly on that, but like as we're kind of wrapping this kind of little part of it up now, I think one of the things you are very good at and active on is I know that as the social media person you with everything, you follow all the people, you are good at doing that. Like how conscious an effort is that to do, etc. And like, yeah, speak on that if you will. And
I will. Very conscious. It's great when I'm having a conversation with someone that I just meet at any poetry related event and we're talking, they're like, oh, what's your name? Are you a poet? And I'm like, yeah, I'm Ellie, I'm a poet, blah, blah, blah. And then we talk and then I go, yeah, I actually run a night. It's everything. And they go, oh my God, I follow you guys. And I'm like, I know you do. Not because I know who follows us, but because I follow every poet that I have thought of. Or what I did in the early days as well was I went to like an Instagram page like Off the Chest and I followed everyone that they follow, and same with Process and same with other poetry nights, where I was like, cool, let me follow the people that these nights are following, because more likely they're going to be interested in poetry and therefore they might come, and if they don't come they'll just know of the night, and it goes a really long way. And so that was a very conscious and active effort to follow everyone who might possibly want to come or be interested in the related events and things surrounding everything. It's a great feeling when people don't know me but they know the night. I think that's a great feeling, and that's how I want it to be, because I don't want it to be the Ellie show. First of all, it's not just me who runs it anyway. I run the night with Cara and Chloe, and they do a lot of the behind the scenes work. But as the host, I think often, and you and Kayla will be able to attest to this, like it's easy to be like, oh yes, this is the Tyrone and Kayla show, or but it's not, and that's through no fault of you guys, and it's no fault of mine, but it's never about the host. While the host can create the vibe and make a good time, it's like, no, it's for poets and poetry.
The challenge with Process, which I am increasingly made more aware of, is I have been on this scene long enough that people know me, and as Kayla will keep mentioning it, so many of these things, level of some people see it as, oh, Tyrone's got a night on, and it's like, no, but do it with Kayla. Kayla's a big part of the night, and like, one of the things I've actively been doing, admittedly, the branding did not help, but like a lot of things I've been doing of late has been trying to get Kayla involved more. I'm trying to do this thing known as delegating. I don't know if you've heard of it, but I'm trying to do that. And
crazy
giving up a lot more of the things, because it's not just me that does it, etc. Yes, it's my baby. I will possibly be a little bit more active on stuff. Again, I'm the one behind the camera and whatnot, so I've got that on my thing of like, yeah, I'll be active in that sense. But it's very much Kayla's nights as well. And I'm trying to show.
And they are an excellent host.
Yes.
And I think that, and it's not your fault. This is not shade to you. But in general, I think Kayla's hosting skills are slept on. Like, they are really good. So yeah, good. I'm glad. No, like, more on that.
No, like, was it like from like, for example, like from last time's process? So this would have been the April process. Like, what Kayla's really good at is being really themselves on stage.
Yeah.
I don't say to a fault. That sounds like an insult there, but like, when something catches Kayla off guard, Kayla will say that caught me off guard and is very open and honest and vulnerable about it in that way, which I think is really endearing to a crowd. Like, and
relaxes the audience.
And like with that, they will explain. And like, what's nice about the way Kayla does it as well is that like when they said they'll say it again to Kayla, Kayla's like, okay, no, don't do that to me. Here is why I don't do it to me, and it's always that thing of not in a putting you down way, but thing of like, here's the thing, I'll explain it to you. Here's my take on it, and I just love.
I agree. And do you know what? I want to see more of that with open micers, features, headliners, whoever, anyone performing, is more like, for example, I remember at, I think maybe it was the Coaches Slam at Uni Slam a couple of years ago, Francis did a poem. Don't click. We're like, and he said, don't give me any clicks. Yeah. And I think I want to see more of that, where it's like, I know that, please don't yell new shit at me. Please don't yell, whatever it might be. And obviously I know probably people don't do it because they just don't mind, and that's fine. But I think, yeah, it's important to communicate with the crowd like that, and to communicate that, to be like, actually, yeah, no clicks, please. And also, please don't yell, say it again. It's just going to throw me off. Fair enough. Like, yeah, but I think that needs to be normalized more. No, actually. Like what Kayla does is like really incredible. But now to move on to our like other part of the Let's Talk About section here. Obviously you've got the new book coming out. So starting off with, what is the book? What is it about? Is your some level of elevator sales pitch for the book to start off with. Wow. But then from that going into, how was it writing your first pamphlet? Ooh, yes. Many questions, many thoughts. I'm going to have to get better at answering these when it's actually out as well, I think. To elevator pitch, what's the book's about? What is the book about? The book is title, and then what's the book about? The book is about so many things. I think, it started off, the reason I don't have a concrete answer or an elevator pitch per se is because it changed a lot. So my book, Rein It In, was my master's dissertation. And initially when I was writing it, I was kind of writing on my relationship with alcohol a lot. And so a lot of the poems were about alcohol and my relationship to it. Wine as we talk about as we drink wine. I don't believe that I have alcoholism. However, I have definitely had dependency things in the past, or I guess a complicated relationship with alcohol. Now I'm, in a place where I tend to go through phases of, I drink semi-regularly or regularly. And then I go through phases where I'm like, I'm good. I'm not going to drink for a while. So it's whatever. I feel comfortable with where I am with it. But initially that was what the manuscript was kind of about. And I was heavily inspired by like Caveat Bar and, the very confessional poets like Melissa Lee Horton. And that was where I was drawing from. And that was what my master's was looking at. Then I went through a very significant breakup from a long-term relationship. And that just completely, it changed my life. And it changed what I was writing about and where I was writing from in a big way. So then the manuscript became something completely different. I submitted that dissertation eventually. I got in, fine, whatever. And then I was like, do you know what? I'm just going to send it out to some places. I'm just going to send it out. And so, I sent it to a few publishers, and then Broken Sleep took it, which is excellent. And they told me in February 2023 that they were going to publish it. They would like to publish it by on the 31st of May 2024. So I always knew that timeline, and I always knew. So the poems, are very confessional. There's a lot of poems that is like, oh, I actually would love it if my mum didn't read this. And I was asked recently, do you ever think about your audience or your reader when you're writing a poem? And I'm like, no, you cannot. You cannot. As in, I'm like, there's a poem in the manuscript that my mum hates. It was initially called Spit, and then the editor said, I think this should be called Thirst Trap. And I said, great idea. And I took that on board. And it's it's a poem about kind of sexualizing when I was spat at in a non-sexual way, completely non-consensually on the street. A man spat at me. And so it was like reverting that and turning on its head and being like, fuck you, I'm going to make you uncomfortable, actually. I don't like, my mum hates the poem. It's not something I want, relatives to read. But is it still in the book? Of course it is, because it has to be. And yeah, that's just something that I feel very strongly about. Well, it's very confessional and maybe I'll regret parts of it in a few years' time. It's how it very reflects who I am and some of the experiences that I've had in a very raw and honest way.
I want to go on to this audience thing because I find that a fascinating viewpoint. As much like I know, for me at least, when I'm writing a poem at first, I don't care about the audience. But when I am editing a poem, whether it's for page or for stage, I am very conscious of the audience in as much as I'm going to be sharing this with them in some way, shape or form. And a lot of my MO, a lot of my, phrasing this properly, my view on a lot of the creative arts level, if I'm sharing it with an audience, I want the audience to get something from it.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you're not doing that, but that kind of thing. But think of where does that come into it for you? Because obviously, level of you'll write poems and you'll be like, God, this is a poem that's just for me, kind of thing. You'll have some poems either it's too personal or it's too stupid or whatever. There'll be that thing of this is a poem that I need to get this out of my head.
Yeah.
But no one else to see it.
I have a lot of poems like that.
It's where, so obviously in the writing of it, maybe not when did the audience come in, and obviously. Audience is a very broad term because there are some poems, like you said, there might be other people. Yes, mum may not like it, but I want more people. So where did the audience come in for you in terms of doing these poems? Did that change any of the poems for you?
Yeah, I think so. I think, there are some poems in there that, I think all of the poems, someone might be able to get something out of it. And there's a lot on, womanhood and experiences that women specifically endure. So I think even if I'm speaking from a very personal and very point of view, I know there's going to be a universality to it, and I think that's great. And of course I do bear in mind will people get something out of this? But I think it can't be your first thought. I think is my take on that. It's no, you have to write what you write. And I have so many poems that are only for me, or that I've only shown to one or two people. And I'm like, cool, that was just very cathartic. And so, I was speaking with Alice Gretton over Unislam about that. And we were both kind of saying to another poet, it's so crucial for you to write poems just for yourself. Not everything has to be shared. And I think that's really important too, because it's self-preservation too. A lot of the poems in my book changed. I took a lot of them out and replaced them with other ones, which I was very thankful to be able to do with Broken Sleep. Partly for that reason, where it's actually this poem better represents who I am. And I know that is going to change, and it must change. We're always evolving. But it felt, better and more me and more, the kind of poems that I want to put out.
And then lastly on this then, for you, as this is the first kind of group of poems you're putting out as a thing together, how was it in terms of the whole, even writing for a while, and so how was it in terms of picking these are the poems I want to put out to the world first, essentially? how much of it was Ellie's greatest hits, I've got an idea, mix of both, word, and like with that, like, not necessarily don't necessarily need to answer this, but the things of like, are there any poems like, cool, this is one of my favourite poems, but it didn't fit the theme of the book, therefore it did not come into the book. And no wine for you, but you can flip the hand.
It's a good question. And I think, we've had this conversation outside of the podcast about, the greatest hits thing where, not every poem in there might be my favourite poem I've ever written, but it makes sense for the cohesive book. There's 3 kind of main themes, and the book is divided into these categories, I guess, as like wanting and yearning, and then like being found and feeling like grounded. And so those are the loose themes, and it, some of the poems go back in time and some of them are in the present and some of them, more positive. And the themes of the book were quite loose as it is, because that was part of it. It's called Rein It In. It's like, we're not trying to hold ourselves back. Like, it's an ironic title to be like, don't rein yourself in. Like, don't hold back. So when I wanted to change some of the poems, I was like, actually, first of all, I think it's a better poem than the one that is currently in there. But second of all, it also works really well for the book. And I think if it hadn't worked well for the book, if the newer poems that I wanted in there didn't work, I wouldn't have forced it. I wouldn't have crowbarred them in, because there are some poems that I've written since that are good and are better than, or I would think are better than, or more, not better, more reflective of who the poet I am now than I was when I wrote the manuscript, but they don't work for the book. So therefore I didn't try and force it. And your greatest hits are going to fluctuate throughout the years anyway. Like, and everyone, and what is very freeing and that I found comforting was like, well, actually, even though this isn't my favorite poem that I've written, it might be someone else's.
Yeah. Oh, I feel that so much.
Yeah. Tottenham Court Road.
That is the ongoing, like, and you just caveat this with the thing of like, if I've published it in the book, I like the poem.
Yeah.
It's not that I dislike any of the poems,
Yes,
but it's always that thing of like, that was the favorite, like, it's amusing hearing when people like, oh, whether it's the thing you published or thing you performed, thing of like, that was your favorite performance of mine, that was your favorite thing. Like, I thought I phoned it in then, and like, it's a wonderfully weird thing about your artistry, in that sometimes like the night or the thing or the moment that people are like, no, that was your best thing. It's like, I did not like that.
Yeah.
What I personally like and value, whether it's like, oh, I felt the most comfortable, I felt the most safe at home, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I felt the most me in it. Doesn't always necessarily translate or doesn't necessarily make it better for other people. It's like, cool, I felt best doing this, but you felt best in that. It's a weird one, but like, I guess for you, like, as I kind of like to wrap this up, then like in like editing this stuff, like how did you discover anything about yourself as a writer in editing? Like was there any moments where it's like, oh no, I write about this stuff and like this has to stay in, or this is the thing that my writing must be about this. Like, I know the more I kind of been writing, and I'm reference guy. That's the thing I do. It's like, what was the right thing? Like, okay, this is me as a writer kind of thing.
That's a good question. I think I don't know if I have an answer for that, because I think a lot of the poems are in it are quite different. I've got a blackout poem in there. I've got one where I also use a lot of references in my poetry. I think also I wanted to say that I do like all of the poems in the book. I really do like them, and I think they work really well as a cohesive unit. And so I'm really excited for the book to be out there and to actually like reread it properly, to be honest. And I also paid attention to like the order that the poems are in and what they reveal and conceal about the speaker a lot. But I don't know if I have any, I'm not married to like one thing necessarily. I think I had to think about it I think I start off with, I like a poem that starts off being about one thing and then ends up being about something a bit different. And I think I do that a few times in the collection or in the pamphlet.
Joel Orteson regularly joke that there'll be the Tyrone twist in a poem at some point.
Yeah, I love a twist.
That thing of like either like, especially there was definitely a phase when writing style wise and how it came out a level of like, cool, you're laughing now. And I was like, Tyrone's gonna get serious any moment now, and there's the serious twist in the poem.
Yeah,
which. Yeah, I did that a lot.
Yeah,
I still do that.
Yeah, that's something I've been leaning into a little bit more. Like it starts off. You know, one of my poems starts like, "Oh, I wish I hadn't met you," and About Time came out. And it's not really about time at all. And it's not. It's like, oh, that's quite a whimsical start, but it's actually I like poems that do that, and I like it when my poems do that.
Oh, I got my Star Wars poem. It's my Star Wars poem. It's not about like I reference Star Wars throughout it, but it's not about Star Wars. But no, that is a wonderful way to just like talk about your first book. And now we're gonna have a little break. I say little break. We're gonna have there's gonna be a card here. It's going to be a graphic, and then for you, there'll be no time at all. For us, there'll be time that's happened. For us, there'll be wine time. But for you, there'll be no time at all. As in the next 10 seconds, we'll be talking and doing slow fire questions. Slow fire. And now we go into our slow fire questions. I have never said it like that before, but this is apparently the vibe we're going for today. Let's blame the wine. She's had some wine. It's not even the wine. I'm not even like tipsy yet. That's just the... Me when I lie. No, I'm joking. Wow. Wow. It's the sobriety in the room with us because... The rudeness of my guests. Wow. I know. Nevertheless, we're doing slow fire questions now where we take my normally fast, quick fire questions and like give them a little bit more time to breathe. Oh, that was a smooth knocking of the mic, but we're fine. But yeah, we give them some more time to breathe. Some of these questions deserve some more time to expand on the answer. We'll see what the answers are. Some of them do not deserve more time, but we'll see how it goes. As I like to aim for, we'll try and do 5 of these. We'll see how time works with that. But with that then, can you give me a random number in between 1 and 100, please? 8. Starting off with then, Facebook or Twitter or Instagram? Instagram. Like, you've not really been a Facebook person, have you? Like, sure. When I first went to uni, I think that was when people were still very much using Facebook. Mm-hmm. And it was mostly because of uni events being put on, which I really appreciate. So yeah, I am. But I think now, yeah, not really. And were never a Twitter person? Not really. I have dabbled. I have had Twitter and I have Twitter currently. I don't know. It didn't click for me in the same way as TikTok did. Yeah. So I put the occasional tweet out mostly on the everything page just to be like, because I know that there are some poets that don't have Instagram and I post on Insta and Facebook for everything. And well, that's the quick, I say quick in slow fire question, but never still the quick tangent on this. Yeah, go on. I feel so much of poetry promotion nowadays is just Instagram. Yes. How do you feel about that? I mean, I feel like, from an everything perspective, we get a big audience and so it's like it's clearly working. That being said though, I don't want to alienate people that don't have that and don't use it for whatever reason. So it's kind of like, yes, this is the beast and we must feed the beast of Instagram, but trying to also be accessible in other ways too. Like, we had flyers and we have flyers as well for that reason as well. But I think for the most part, for us anyway, like it does work. How about you guys in process? We just used Instagram essentially, and yeah, I have no idea how so many people find out about process in some ways. I think a lot of time is word of mouth, and I think that's the thing. Like, whilst Instagram is definitely a good place for it, I think word of mouth is another part of it. I mean, the good thing, especially with some of with the the good thing with the regular nights, I can say words, is having that regular, I can say time slot as if it's a TV show, but that having that regular, like, well, we are the last Tuesday of every month, you are the first Monday of every month, and having that as a thing as well. And coupled with that, especially for everything and a little bit with process as well, that thing of like, it's not like, oh, I've only found out about it a week beforehand and I'm going to miss out on a cheaper ticket or going to miss out on a performer ticket kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's that thing of, even if I find out a week before it, I'm still going to have the same spot, chances, whatever, to perform as someone who booked it a month in advance.
Yeah.
Looking at the crowds, who's coming, etc., and not to say I only want this audience, but it definitely feels like I am not losing anyone by not posting on Facebook, and I was not gaining anyone by posting on Facebook.
Yeah, I think that's it. So I felt that when I was running Grizzly Pear, you know, before my time running that night, they were exclusively Facebook. So that was where they were loading it and the events page and all of that. And then when I started running it with Matt Sowerby, I was like, Matt, I really think we should start an Instagram. I just had an inkling. I was like, I just feel like, I don't know. And Matt was a bit more like, I don't know. And I said, look, Matt, I'll do all the work. You don't have to do anything.
Well, it's one of those things where, I was talking to Laurie Eves about this when I was doing an interview for my documentary, and we were talking about a different, because so Laurie is one of the few people in the documentary that I'd interviewed for the documentary beforehand.
That you had? Sorry.
Yes, already, yeah.
Cool.
And like one of the differences is that thing of like the rise of Instagram. Like, not that Instagram wasn't around then, but like it wasn't used as much or as regularly in a kind of way. And like Instagram, I feel, has become the dominant social media platform where Facebook used to be.
Yeah, I think so.
But Facebook was the primary one. Twitter, I'd argue, was second.
Fair, yeah.
And now Instagram is the dominant one, with maybe, I don't want to say maybe TikTok second. I don't just want to go into a thing of when I don't know what is where. Like TikTok is very well used, but I feel that also
for
TikTok,
events.
Not for events, and also I think TikTok, I feel like there's more people that are just completely not on TikTok.
Yeah, that's
kind
true.
of thing.
Because people can be very passively on Instagram.
Yeah, and like passively on Twitter as well, whereas TikTok, I feel they're much more active on.
Yeah,
but,
that's true.
You know, I think, Instagram has definitely grown and changed and become the primary thing. But yes, another number, please.
Oh, okay. Let's do 50.
50, we are going for, would you kiss the last person you kissed again?
Yeah. It's my boyfriend. So, yeah. Simple.
I think that one is self-explanatory.
It's very
no
easy.
need to build on that one. So,
yes.
I mean, I could go on gossip on your dating, like how is it going? But I feel that, like, do you want that to be what this podcast is about?
Not really.
There you go. Give me another number, please.
60.
60. We are jumping to, what's your dream job?
Poet.
So actually, to ever so slightly specify on this, obviously poet is a very arguably encompassing term. To put it into more practical terms, I think it's safe to say we know the reality of being a poet is more than just writing, etc.
Yeah.
So whether it is teaching, going to schools, if it is teaching, where are you going with schools? Is it the community? Is it blah, blah, blah?
Yeah.
Is it performing? Is it doing commissions, etc.? What is in your ideal poetry world, what does your poet job look like?
It looks like having equal space and capacity to write my own stuff, to read, and to teach, preferably at university level. That's what it would look like for me. Like, I would love to be a lecturer and do poetry workshops for undergrads and postgrads, to be honest. Yeah, I just feel like I get a lot out of it. You know, I'm really enjoying doing mentoring one-to-one, looking really deeply into people's poetry and giving my thoughts and my, the things that I've learned and am still continuing to learn. But also, yeah, having where if I could have a job, make money from being abundantly curious and just having the space to read about poetry and read poetry, that would be really important, Yeah. That would be my dream.
And now to end this.
What's your favourite number?
Favourite number 22.
Right, so give me that one.
22 is the wonderfully not boring one, but underwhelming one to end potentially. Do you have a nickname?
Well, technically my name is my nickname, really.
Aware.
So my name,
let's build on this then.
Let's do the government name to start.
So with this, how do you... I'll just put this on camera so everyone can feel guilty and feel shame. How do you feel about the whole your name situation?
What does that even mean?
No, so like, obviously you have the government name, etc.
Yeah.
What is the name you prefer to have? Do you mind when people call you Ellie? Do you want Heloise more, etc.?
Nah.
And especially as it actually also another one, actually in a vaguely serious thing, especially with the book coming out and being published, etc.
Yeah.
How was it in that thing of like, cool, I am published as full name, but also call me this, and stage name? Like, where are you on that?
That's a really good question, actually. I think, my parents named me Eloise, but they gave me a silent H at the start and accents on the, it's the French spelling for Eloise. I'm named after Eloise of Eloise and Abelard, which, look that story up. It's crazy. Anyway, so growing up, that was really important. But what I learned when I was at primary school really was that everyone would say Heloise or Heloise, and that was just too annoying. And I was like, I started to feel a bit disconnected from my name in that sense. And then I think at home, I'm not sure how or why, but my sister, my brother, everyone was calling me Ellie. And so I think when I went to secondary school, I was like, it's fine, just call me Ellie, because it's just too much faff. And then I got used to that. And I think Ellie feels like the more casual version of Eloise. Eloise for me feels very formal. But that being said, I don't have a preference really. At work, my day job, like sometimes I get called Eloise and I'm like, that's fine. While I was at school, and still like, sometimes everything, like a couple of people that I went to school with sometimes come, which is really lovely. And they're like, Eloise, oh my God. And I'm like, that's really weird. But I'm also like, I don't hate it. Like, it's not like no, it's just like, wow, it feels like another me or another version of me. And then funnily enough, because I also go by Elle, right? Very straightforward reason for that, because, a lot of people maybe thought, well, is this a gender thing? Which completely understandable. But no, it was because when I was doing my master's, there were 3 or 4 Ellies. And I was like, I'm not even a real Ellie. So like,
I don't want to come on your, if that's your, I don't want to come into your turf.
I was like, actually, why don't we just say right now? And, there were I didn't know a lot of people on my master's at all. It was all new people. So I was like, just call me out, it's fine. Which is really sweet. I saw one of my former lecturers at the Verve Poetry Festival, and I haven't seen her in 2 years. And she was like, she's been on sabbatical and things. And she just went like, by the way, like, do you like Elle? And she was clearly asking from the POV of like, gender, and it was just really sweet. I was like, I literally don't mind, and that is true. So yeah, no one needs to feel bad listening to this, or because I just really don't mind. I think go for Ellie. It's my most commonly used name, but I don't mind. I really don't. It's not attached to gender for me. So yeah. And
like, to wrap this up, then, like, I feel like it's not the most common thing, but obviously you will have a Kid and Nancy and other people like that. Is that true to say? Like, whilst it's not necessarily a stage name and anything that kind of way, like, were you ever tempted to have any kind of like a stage name or any separation of like, Ellie is the person that runs this, but Heloise is the like, this is the published poet, or is there just like a level of just...
I really wanted, when I was thinking about, on my pamphlet, what name I wanted, I was like, no, it needs to be the most authentic me. I think there's something about Eloise de Satge being written down with the bells and whistles. I feel that is me. So it's like, yeah, sure, like you can see that name, but still say Ellie. So it's not necessarily a stage name at all, actually. I just wanted it to be as most me as possible. And there's, something about names in general that very personal to like my family and, that lineage, I guess, and where that comes from is important, even if it's not what I go by. So I wanted it to be like my boyfriend's dad actually asked me like, are you going to be published under Ellie or Eloise? And I was like, without a doubt, Eloise. And he was like, yeah, that's cool. Because it just, it feels more me. It feels, that's how you'll get to know me. That's how a stranger will get to know me, because hopefully strangers will be buying my books, not just friends and family, which love that. Please buy it. Friends and family. But, people who don't know me at all and may never meet me could read my poetry. So, cool. Have it under my proper name, for want of a better word.
On that wonderfully clarifying note, we're going to end the podcast there. Thank you for joining us for the drunk edition of the Process podcast. I just stop calling it the poetry podcast. It's not a poetry. Process podcast has been done. Ellie, you have a camera here if you want to shout out anything. I mean, we've already shouted out everything and the book, but if you want to clarify it anymore, by all means, here's your camera. Promote your shit.
Follow me on Insta at Ellie Desatge, which is ELLIEDESATGE. Drop me a DM if you want to become friends. Other things to shout out is always just like, where the word things live. If you're like, I want to go to a poetry night, but I don't know where to start. Where the word things live is run by Fiona, and I believe now also Sumner. An excellent resource for, all of the poetry nights that are happening in London. And they do so much work for that and with that. So I would recommend those guys. And the podcast you're wrong about, nothing to do with poetry, just a very good podcast. Thank you for Chloe for teaching me about that podcast. It's great.
We are Process. All the links are in the bio. There's a link tree that'll link you to all the things from our next open mic night to also our other social things. There's the Patreon where you can support us financially because that helps keep the lights on. Literally, I bought these new lights. They cost money. Your money helps me pay for these lights.
They're very nice lights.
So it literally keeps the lights on. I can actually say that's an actual factual thing now. But nevertheless, this is the end of the podcast. And as I end the poetry nights, I also end the podcast in the same way, quoting my favourite Irish philosopher. And I'll keep calling him philosopher, even though he just never done philosophy. I will still keep doing it because it's a fun joke to do. Quoting Joel Orterson, I love you all. Now fuck off. Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Or good morning. Good anything. Good.
Good.